Consideration of a petition from the Rye Arts Center to amend the text of the Rye City Code to permit Arts Center use as a new use permitted subject to additional standards and requirements in the R1 to RT residence districts.
You got to get out of there.
I may need some help, Mr. Mayor.
Isn't that you?
Action shot?
I can't. I'm not good with the butterfly. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Rye Arts Center, my name is Leo Napier. I'm with the law firm of Harfness, Kraut, and Pearlstein. Also in attendance tonight are various members of the Rye Arts Center board, the executive team, as well as our project consultants. We're very excited to be here. This project has been several years in the making, and we hope everyone is as enthusiastic to move this forward as we are. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Rye Arts Center, but just a little bit of background for those who aren't. The Rye Arts Center is a not-for-profit that is the largest multi-arts center in the region. The Rye Arts Center has operated at its current location at 51 Milton Road for the past 50-plus years. They offer programming and classes to a wide range of ages, presently from ages 3 to 96. The Arts Center offers over 150 classes and workshops in various visual and performing arts. They serve over 3,000 people annually. They work with and employ over 75 artists, and they provide free grant-funded outreach programming from pre-K all the way to seniors. The Rye Arts Center has done wonderful work with the existing facilities at 51 Milton Road, but the future is limited with respect to programming by the age of the existing structure and the physical limitations of that structure. In 2020, 25 Milton Road, which is immediately adjacent to the existing facility of 51 Milton Road, was put up for sale. That property was purchased and then donated to the Rye Arts Center in 2022 by a generous donor. 25 Milton Road is approximately 2.1 acres. It's located in the R1 and R3 zoning districts, and the donation was intended to be, the purpose of the donation was for the property to be redeveloped with a new modern arts facility. However, the current zoning ordinance doesn't contemplate an arts center type use at all. There's no relevant use that it could be shoehorned into. That's the purpose of our being here tonight. The vision for the future. The Rye Arts Center is looking to develop this site with a new modern arts facility which could greatly improve upon the types of programming and exhibitions the Arts Center could offer. This would create a cultural hub that supports and fosters community through the arts. There would be increased scholarship opportunities. It would increase the number of musicians and artists the Arts Center could work with, greater outreach initiatives, and new dedicated spaces for newer and modern class offerings and better utilization. I'll get to some of those uses a little bit later in the presentation. While we feel the Arts Center has done a great job over the past 50 years, this opportunity would allow the Arts Center to better serve the community and stay relevant in the decades into the future. Therefore, we're requesting the council to amend the zoning ordinance to allow an Arts Center facility as a special permit use in the residential zoning districts, subject to additional standards and requirements. In your packets, we provided the full text of the zoning amendment within the petition, but just some highlights of that. The proposed additional standards and requirements are intended to limit the application of this use to properties of sufficient acreage and appropriately located within the city to be on major streets and adjacent to other public uses. The specific standards and requirements we proposed are for the site to be owned and operated, or the use to be owned and operated by a not-for-profit entity, that there be no parking in the rear and side yard setbacks of adjacent residential districts, that the site be at least 2 acres in size and be located on a major thoroughfare. There's also a proposed parking requirement which was supported by our parking and traffic study that was submitted with your information. I know that was a lot to take in, and city staff had recommended that we present a map that just shows if you were to adopt these standards, what other properties would qualify for this use. So on this slide, if I have a cursor, the site Can you all see the hand there? The blue dot on the map is the subject property. There are a few other properties that have sufficient acreage, are located on major streets, and are adjacent to other public uses. Specifically, there's 3 that are adjacent to the Rye Rec facility. There's 1 adjacent to the Rye Nature Center. And then there's another one on Boston Post Road, which is the Parsons Estate, which is a protected site and structure, but is in between the J Heritage Center, the Marshlands, and Rye Golf. Our team developed a concept plan and a parking and traffic study to better help the council visualize what a development could look like at this site. The vision the Art Center has is that this be a campus-like development that inherently ties into the existing facility with an increase in parking, attempting to preserve as much of the green space. There's, as I previously mentioned, there's 2 acres of property here, and there's a fairly significant green space and lush wooded area behind the facility.
If you would, on that.
Yes.
What is the area outlined in blue?
So in the back right corner of the property, this dashed line is the wetland buffer. So in this back corner, the back right corner, there is flagged wetland. The outer limits of the more solid line is the 100-foot wetland buffer.
I see. And then the arc that touches on the building?
So that would be that's the outer perimeter of the wetland buffer. So there is, the building itself is actually, on this concept, is outside of the wetland buffer itself. Portions of the patio would encroach into the buffer. In addition, we've examined some potential increase of parking on the city-owned site, which would also be within the buffer.
And your thoughts about compensating or how to compensate for encroachment on the buffer?
So that would be addressed during the Planning Commission process. We haven't yet, in an attempt to try to keep the soft costs down. We're here before the council to seek a zoning amendment. If and when that zoning amendment is granted, we will retain a landscape consultant to come up with a mitigation plan. There's certainly plenty of area in the backyard to do a wonderful job with proposing mitigation.
And it's all just buffer. There's no actual wetland.
The wetland itself is in the back right corner here, so the wetland itself wouldn't be disturbed
Fine,
under
just the buffer.
Yes.
Okay.
And there is a permit process to all that.
Yep.
And that wetland, I noted in the papers, is not subject to city jurisdiction.
It would be
It is, right?
to DEC jurisdiction or city
No,
jurisdiction?
the city of Rye, I think, has its own wetland jurisdiction when no one else does.
Yes, so it would be subject to the City of Rye wetland jurisdiction. So any encroachment into the wetland buffer would be subject to receiving a wetland permit from the Planning Commission.
There may be a box that needs to be corrected in the secret application.
So if on the short EAF form, the DEC, so there's an EAF mapper that's a DEC tool, and that auto-fills in some of the boxes, which you can't change. So in generating the EAF for this site, because it's not a mapped freshwater wetland by the DEC, that box automatically checks off no.
Even though it speaks to local agency jurisdiction.
Yes.
Ooh, so we have like a case for whiteout? Is whiteout coming back?
Okay, I realize from your prior comment, I'm getting ahead of us.
And the EAF was really towards the zoning text amendment without having a project proposed, that there would be a different form generated and different approvals required if and when there were a building proposed here.
Okay.
And to that point, my final point on this slide was that the ultimate development of the site would be subject to review by the Planning Commission for site plan, special permit approval, and a wetland permit to the extent there's any disturbance within the buffer. Contemplated programming in the new facility would be modern gallery spaces with temperature and lighting controls, a sculpture garden in the rear yard, a teen zone, which would have some augmented or virtual reality elements to it, AV and music production areas, podcasting, metalwork and sculpture, and jewelry making, a lot of things that the current facility can accommodate within their space presently. And then in addition to the contemplated uses of the new facility, as part of this whole project, there would also be enhancements to the existing facility at 51 Milton Road. The Rye Arts Center is contemplating, once some of these other uses are moved into the new facility, would allow them to better dedicate the space in the current facility by having dedicated dance studios, providing enhancements to the entryway, an expanded ceramics and sculpture studio, studios for artists and residents, film production and editing, with the idea being there would be a new home for Rye TV in the current gallery space, upgrades to the painting studios, a children's art wing, soundproofing and flooring in the music studios, new private lesson studios, as well as green improvements and ADA compliance. And so with that, I have our project team here. I have board members here. Really, the next step in the process, as we've addressed your questions, would be to hopefully have a referral to the Planning Commission for a report and recommendation back to your council.
So, can you give me a sense of numbers? I think I read 35,000 over history, but what's the hope for gained in participants, and how will the age groups change?
The age groups I wouldn't imagine would change much at all.
I'm asking because of pickup and drop off and cars and in and out. I just kind of want to get a sense of what the dream is as the Art Center thinks about its expansion and programming. Like, who are we talking about? Who's the target for these new classes, for these performances? I'm just trying to get a sense of it.
Certainly gathering some more teen involvement would be one of the goals. As far as pre-K to seniors, it already covers a wide range, so I can't really expand beyond that. As far as if there's been projections as to how much additional foot traffic is coming through, I don't know. I'd have to defer to Adam if we've taken studies that far. I can tell you that our traffic study has estimated there'd be minimal impact to the road network, and the driveways would all function properly.
Can you bring back this? There was a slide. It was white type on a black background. That keep back a couple more. It had a little more. That one. No primary activity carried on for gain. Can you just walk through some of these standards? How does that work?
Sure. So
what do you mean by that?
In your zoning code, you have permitted uses, and then you have uses permitted subject to additional standards and requirements. This would fall into that latter category, and these are the additional standards and requirements we're proposing, and ultimately it would be up to your council as to if there needs to be others, that these need to be changed.
Right.
The language, no primary activity carried on for gain, is essentially a not-for-profit that's used in other places for similar type uses in the code, so we just copy that language in here.
You mean for no for-profit gain? You don't mean for gain for the Art Center, because you're going to have revenue-generating activities on the property.
Yes, without an ultimate owner that's benefiting from that. Essentially a not-for-profit
all right,
use.
so that's your nonprofit language, okay.
Yes. The no parking inside or rear yards adjacent to the residential districts, we had an exception to that, and it's really just to apply to the side yard with the existing facility. And that's to provide a buffer from the residential properties nearby. And then the minimum lot size of 2 acres and adjacent to a municipally owned land is intended to allow these types of uses to be in areas that are already being used for public uses and have sufficient size and acreage to accommodate this type of a use.
Okay, thanks. Can you jump ahead to the slide that had the other areas within Rye?
Yep.
This slide. Can you just explain that? So which one is the Art Center? That one?
In blue.
In blue, okay. And so the
shaded beige or the other
Yeah.
5 sites that would qualify under these standards if someone wanted to move forward with that.
So if I understand what you're saying is if we were to take that zoning text amendment as proposed, these other plots of land would also suddenly qualify?
Yes, they are all privately owned residences presently.
But they would all qualify to
They
convert.
meet the
They could all
standards.
wake up and say, I'm going to be an art center tomorrow. I meet the standard.
Yes, it's not as easy as that.
Okay.
They would have to then make an application. There's additional standards that are more generic and general for uses subject to additional standards and requirements that provide some discretion to the Planning Commission as to whether or not the location makes sense and takes into account the impacts to the neighborhood, et cetera. But yes, they would meet the locational and acreage requirements.
Got it. Okay, so you're just showing us what else would qualify, not, okay.
Yes.
I mean, not that I'm against lots of art centers, it's just kind of, it's a little town.
So can I ask a question about that? Because I'm just literally writing this down. We capture, by saying R1 and RT, you're capturing those other big spots, right? Like what, in Christian, we can't do spot zoning, which I understand, but there's a concept of being able to have natural borders on that. Could you do this, RT, R1, within the natural borders of like Midland, Milton, Grace Church, Appowamus, or something like that? Because we've done something like that before. For the Y, right there.
So there's too many lawyers in the room for me to talk responsibly about spot zoning. You can narrow it down to a point any way you want. There's a lot of ways to do this. But if that area becomes geographically too small, it may be subject. So you can define it however you want, but I can't tell you today what's the exact number. Is it 4?
Yeah.
Is it 5? Is it 3? It's probably not 1.
Yeah.
But given the size of this particular property, it was 1 for, say, the Osborne home. But that was a 55-acre property. It's a very different scenario.
Well, I'm just thinking because I was thinking the same thing Josh Nathan is, which is like it also opens up all these other places. And if we're trying to say, we don't want a bunch of rival art centers coming in and like, it's like a showdown. Do we say, hey, we want something that's actually closer to the core of like, downtown and stuff like that, and therefore find natural boundaries that are realistic? Like that would be my thought. I was thinking Grace Church, Appowamus, Midland, and Milton, anything that's R1 or RT in there.
Yes. So to make that achievable, I understand that the planning rationale would be it's closer to higher trafficked areas or commercial areas, less residential. To accomplish that, you probably have to reduce the minimum lot areas so that you can actually achieve a meaningful number of eligible properties. But that's absolutely something that can be looked into.
Okay.
I don't have the answer, but I get the concept.
Yeah.
It's rational, makes sense.
Look at that. Every once in a while.
That's what we do.
Every once in a while.
I mean,
Rational
everyone's
makes
a
sense.
planner.
Yeah.
It works.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback off that point, our petition is simply our proposal. Ultimately, the council can adopt and make whatever changes to language that they deem.
Other questions?
Can you just go back to the parking for a moment? How many new spaces are you adding?
So just to be clear, this is a
I
concept plan.
understand.
As part of our proposal, we have suggested parking requirement. Ultimately, through the planning and city council process, that requirement may get heightened, it may get lessened, I don't know. This plan provides an additional 33 spaces. So going from 58 existing spaces on site to 91 spaces proposed, that would be both in a combination of parking on the subject property in front of the building and then additional parking on the 51 Milton Road parcel.
For Christian, for any development that the planning commission that goes before the planning commission, they always consider parking as a part of it, and then put out their recommendations or mandates as a part of this. So if what you're planning is under, the planning commission would come back and say, no, you need to approve or advance. We'd need 10 more spots or whatever, right? Isn't that what normally happens?
Yes, so this allows them to provide less than the required amount of parking off-site. And in this case, if they make a finding that there's suitable parking on the street or in an adjacent municipal parking lot, the on-site spaces of 16 or whatever it is acceptable because of these other off-site opportunities. they would go through a process to make sure they demonstrate that that's adequate. It's not just about how many spaces you have, but it also gets into the operation of the actual use and classes and timings and peak of this and that. But this draft proposed resolution, petition rather, is deferring to the Planning Commission that
Yeah,
that
but they'll do all that
analysis.
work to decide, is my point. Like, we're not gonna, there's a little chicken and the egg here, right? Because you don't have all the specific answers because it hasn't gone before planning, and you're not gonna spend all that money unless you know you get I get it. Okay, thank you.
So just looking at that rendering that you have now, it all looks like it's on the same level. But I just remember from our tour, there's like a lot of different elevations going on. Are you contemplating leveling everything, or is that just a feature of the particular drawing?
So it's hard to show grade changes on a rendering, particularly at this angle and elevation, but the idea would be to have the building work with the grade, so it would there'd be terraces that would slope down off the back and then eventually meet the natural grade there. Certainly there would be some site work in the front to meet code requirements with respect to working out the parking in the front and providing appropriate access to the building.
Has there been any neighborhood feedback?
We've met with all of the immediate neighbors who accepted our invitation to meet. There's been various feedback. There's been positive feedback. There's been mixed feedback on the overall look of the building. For the most part, I'd say it's been mainly supportive.
And is this all posted anywhere, or are we seeing it?
The neighbors have seen a similar presentation to this, not with my bullet points, but with the art centers and further detail on thoughts for what the space will be used for, and it's changed somewhat in response to the feedback we've received. One of the comments we received from the neighbor across the street was, in the renderings, the existing retaining wall along the Milton Road was missing. He said that wall's been there, it's consistent. We made sure we got that. There's no intent to take down that wall, so we worked that back into the rendering. Another comment was there was too much parking in front. We've reduced the amount of parking we were showing in front, but again, this is all conceptual, and we're reacting to comments, but we're still 2 steps away from actually having a fully baked plan.
Right. No, I appreciate that. I know the challenge of, if you have a rendering, this is not really what it's going to be. It's a concept. We've had that before, and it's always a challenge. If it's too abstract, people don't get it, and then they worry. If it's too concrete, then they get focused on all the details, and neither is really accurate. So that can be a little challenging. But this isn't up on like a public website where just anyone in the public can.
Because now it's all in our document.
Now, tonight.
It's on your agenda.
Tonight is the first, is the debut.
I believe it was in the most recent, at least web page of the My Rye.
Right. So tonight, or this meeting is the premiere of this being public to the community
public at large.
large.
Yes.
Okay.
To the immediate neighbors, no.
Okay, they've seen it, but the public at large hasn't had a chance to
Correct.
really think about it. Okay.
So I just have trying to understand the whole parking thing. So 51 Milton shares its parking with the tennis courts and the fields. It's considered part of that whole campus. So when you're talking about this, you're talking about changing demands in the whole campus and not just change. That's why I asked the earlier question about how much are you looking for growth of children and what are you thinking of in size, because if it's adjacent to this larger rec complex and that's the vision, what if rec grows its programming? I'm just trying to understand the impact, and so I know that you can't really answer it, but I'm just kind of trying to understand the programming goals in a way that just helps me understand the demands on that space for parking and traffic.
So under this current concept, we would have 16 spaces on site, but we would also be adding 17 more spaces to 51 Milton in the back corner of the lot there. In addition, we're showing a pull-off area by the curb cut on Milton to alleviate some of the bottlenecking that occurs during the children's programming. these are some thoughts that we've been kicking around.
A lot of the parking for tennis, actually, Jamie, happens in the lot right in
Yeah,
front of that. Like, there's not as many
I just was fascinated by
parking
the fact that
for.
51 Milton is this bigger spot. And I just
Yeah,
wanted to
no,
think
I mean,
about it.
but I think
Yeah.
I think these are all the right questions that planning helps sift through a little bit, and traffic studies and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like that will be answered in time. It goes back to the little chicken and the egg thing. But I do think you've got that other lot, if you will, in front of the tennis courts that people generally use for the fields. And I mean, having been a soccer mom and stuff like that, they generally use those two rec lots off of Midland more than they use Milton. But you guys would know better if that's the case. There's not a lot of people are skating to the skate park. Anyway.
Two thoughts. One question, one thought. Where are you in the fundraising for this? Is that started, middle?
On fundraising,
Yeah.
there's been a soft start to it.
Okay. That's enough.
We've been kind of waiting for the big reveal here before we could really get underway.
Okay. Just wanted to know where that all was. So I think what would be great is for this to be on the Rye the city website, which it is, and for the video of this meeting to be out there and let it bake in the community a little bit, and see what kind of feedback and comments we get. That's my feeling, and then take it up again at another time, just so that it just gets to socialize. I think it's very exciting to grow and expand the Arts Center and what it's capable of doing, and just let it socialize a little bit now that it's had its debut here in City Hall.
I would love to have the Planning Commission's input, even as we keep it on the city website and socialize it, as you say, Josh. But there are technical elements to this that are important, that will be really important to the neighbors and to the people who use Milton Road. And getting our planning commission on those and getting an advisory view, I think would really be helpful to our thought process and the communities.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Gets some of the people who do this on a daily basis addressing some of those questions you're talking about, Jamie.
I think there's a time when that'll be the right thing to do. I'm just a fan of, let's see what the general response is, and then let that inform next steps.
Do we cause a little bit more, what I anticipate, having this not being our first rodeo, people asking questions we won't be able to answer, and then you would need the Planning Commission to weigh in on? Like, I guess I do see the wisdom in sort of dual tracking this, which is put this out there, let the community, but then when they come back with questions, hopefully the Planning Commission's had a chance to look at it too, and you've got more answers, or we do anyway.
I think it just, I just think it helps frame the issues for planning and other advice and our own consideration. There's two components. There's the concept, and then there's the broader issue of, what the zoning text amendment really is, and taking a look at that. And there might be some predicate legal questions that we now have, now that we're looking at it that way as well. I mean, I had the pleasure of your folks giving a tour to, I think every one of us got a tour of the property and the site and hearing about it. But there's the less, maybe less exciting component, which is just the legal text itself and how that works. And when you showed that map of the other properties, and again, I'm not terribly worried about us having art centers popping up all over the place, and if that happened, that'd be kind of neat. But it just made me appreciate that the zoning text amendment has some other implications, and I so appreciate you bringing them out in front of us and saying, look, this is what it means, and I'd love to be able to have a little time to digest that and maybe talk with Kristen, get some counsel on that.
The Planning Commission doesn't impact our ability to continue to study. It doesn't predispose us in any way to saying yes or no, ultimately, on the zoning text amendment.
It just delays things, actually, right? Because then we're going to not do anything and then hopefully ultimately go to Planning Commission. Like, why wouldn't we just get all that information and then...
It's just
I don't want to
advisory.
deprive myself of getting information until later. I'd rather have it now and inform.
And we're open to, we'll have this on the website. We'll be open to community comment throughout. And we'll have the benefit of both the Planning Commission and additional community comment when this comes back to us from the Planning Commission. And we will still have full jurisdiction to say yes or no to the zoning text amendment, dependent upon where our study of the text amendment has led us.
Yeah, it feels like we're kicking the can down the road if we don't try to like get some of that information. Like if it feels like a little bit of a delay versus like getting the, I don't know. I would just like to know what planning thinks of this because that'll help inform my thinking along with what, public sentiment is a reaction.
Why don't we just see how the council feels? I'll make a motion to send it to planning if someone will second.
I will.
Just one thought is,
Yep.
if we have another hearing here, and we can get the public in, really get an idea of what the public thinks about this, whereas if you go send it to the planning commission, they're probably all going to go down to the planning commission and talk to them. So I don't know if we prefer maybe to get feedback here before we send it down, or would we prefer, we could schedule something tonight so everybody knows we're not kicking it down the road. I just throw that out, as an option. We could take it up, hear from the public on this because they're just learning about this, in a meeting, in the next meeting or the meeting after, and then decide to send it down to the planning commission, or they're all going to show up to the planning commission. So those are probably the two things that'll happen.
I'm fine with that, Bill. I like the idea of we can set a date.
If people come here, they'll largely be coming here with questions we can't answer, and the Planning Commission can. Again, I think it'd be great for.
I just want to clarify, and Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you refer it to the Planning Commission for an advisory opinion, I don't believe they hold a public hearing typically.
So we would just be getting their views.
You'd be getting the Planning Commission's views on the text as it exists now, unless you tweak it. But they don't hear from the public. That will come back to you ultimately as a local law, and that's at the time where you would get the public comment.
So Bill's concern about their going to the Planning Commission instead of us, that can't happen.
They can attend, but they won't be heard.
So they still have to come here.
The other thing is they'll do a lot of work, then it'll come back to us. Maybe it'd be good for us to get some feedback first before all that happens.
I just want it all. Like, why are we slowing it down though, Bill?
I'm just throwing it out as to, what we're going to be thinking about.
I guess, Julie, how I think of it is this. If people come and they see this and they're excited about it, I was excited about it going over there, and I think people will appreciate that they have the opportunity to come here, express support, concerns, whatever their views are. Before we go too far down the line, I think we could do ourselves a disservice if we're seen as sending it down the line now.
No, we're just giving an opinion.
And I don't even know when the Planning Commission would meet on this. What's the harm of just saying, hey, we're going to take this up again in a meeting or two and give the public an opportunity to comment.
We don't preclude them from doing that by giving it to planning.
Okay.
We're just giving ourselves more information rather than delaying our own information gathering. I'm not in favor of stymieing our education. I would like to know what they think and have that input in my mind. Of course we want to hear from the public, and that will still happen. So, I feel like it's... I don't understand why we wouldn't want more information.
It just seems like delay to me. But there's a motion, and What would we need, roll call?
I would recommend a roll call in this instance.
The motion is to send it to planning, to have the information on the city website, and to be open to public comment going forward.
So we're just getting advisory opinion, or, yeah, right, from planning?
It would be a referral to planning for its advisory recommendation back to you.
And then we keep it open and invite people to come.
This isn't a public hearing,
Right,
so you don't need to do anything else. We've gotten the direction to make sure it's on the website.
okay.
You will receive comments. We can make that clear. We can set up a email address for comments if you wanted. But the motion really should just be referring to the Planning Commission. The rest will do.
Okay, shoot.
Councilman Cunningham?
I excuse myself.
Councilman Henderson?
I would vote no. I'd like to have one more hearing here before we send it down.
It's not a hearing. What do you mean hearing?
No, or a public comment. Have a on the agenda for public comment.
Councilwoman Jensen?
I'm going to vote no, largely because I also sit on the Planning Commission, and I think it's the responsibility of the council at this moment in time to really have some time to sit with this and to think it through. And I don't want to signal anything that we shouldn't signal to our volunteers that are at planning. But I do agree with Julie and the mayor that we need information, we need the experts of the Planning Commission, we need to hear Christian and staff. And I absolutely am not in disagreement, but at this moment, I'm signaling I can wait another meeting.
Councilman Nathan?
I'd like us to have another meeting at the council level, so I'm a no.
Councilwoman Souza?
Yeah, I would love to get information.
Councilman Ward?
So what I've heard so far, it seems I'm in favor of having another meeting where I could have public comment. I'll go no.
Mayor Cohn?
Yes. Okay, so we
So,
have a result.
This feels very like limbo to me, and I don't love this for you guys because I think we're trying to move things along and get information. And so I am just beseech my colleagues here not to string this along. Like, if you want one more meeting to seek feedback, but my full expectation is at this next meeting, we will go to the Planning Commission and get them advisory. If anybody feels otherwise, and we think that this is a protracted delay process, I'd like to know that now.
We can put it on the agenda in 3 weeks,
Next meeting.
if you want.
Yeah, I do.
The mayor sets the agenda.
That's why we're doing this. Come on, all we're saying is we want to have another meeting. You don't have to start.
No, I want to make sure, these are people who come and care about this and have done a lot of work on this, and we're being really ambiguous about slowing things down. I don't understand the logic. You guys have a rationale for it. I just want to be able to say, we are going to move things along. We do, and unless that's not what you mean, in which case you should own that. But I think what I'm hearing is we do want to slow it down a little bit, so we're going to do that. But I'm hoping that that is not a be-all, end-all, and that we will actually be responsive to the Arts Center and our community and not slow down our own information gathering for a reason that is not clear to me.
Let's move on. Thank you.
If I may, just before you move to the next agenda, is there any, I understand we'll be on in 3 weeks, is it?
Yes.
Okay, the 29th. Is there any additional information any of the council members would like, or from what I heard, it sounds like it's more to hear from the public, but just so we don't come back on the 29th and I haven't given you something you're looking
No,
for.
we have this, so that's what I want.
I wasn't at the tour, so I didn't receive any of that. So I'd like to get
If you'd
the
like to
same.
get access, no problem. We can work that out with
So
Greg.
whatever those conversations was, just the same access.
You got it.
Give him a tour, please.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, like, you know.
Yeah, once you,
Perks, right?
Yes, get a tour, yes. Very good
Thank
point,
you.
James.
Thank you all. Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I would like to, while we have a floating item that I would like to take up. That is while there are people here, yeah, so that it is as public as it should be, and that is consideration of a potential moratorium on development in a limited number of districts, particularly the Central Business District, while we study issues of bulk and height and character. And Kristen, can you speak to
Sure.
the matter?
Thank you. So, based on some recent correspondence the City Council received, as well as discussions amongst the City Council regarding recent applications that have gone through and that are going through the planning review process, what you have before you is a local law adopting a 6-month moratorium temporarily prohibiting the review, processing, or approval of any new or application that has not received a building permit related to any multifamily and non-residential development in the city's B2, which is known as the Central Business District, and RA zones. This is limited, again, to multifamily and non-residential development, and it is really to allow the City Council to take a closer look at some of the larger developments that the City Council has seen in recent years, and give you a chance to look at the height, the bulk, the massing, and the overall character of the community in these two districts. There is, in the draft moratorium that's put before you, there is a proposed waiver process. That waiver process does allow applicants who are caught in this moratorium to come to the City Council and seek a waiver. The standards are set forth in this local law and are available to anyone.
So the action is to schedule a public
Correct.
hearing for this on January 21st? What?
Correct.
So,
Yes.
okay.
So this is a local law. It is subject to a public hearing, and that, depending on when council's availability is, there has been the discussion of January 21st at 6 p.m. To hold that public hearing. If that is amenable to the council, then the next step for you to take would be just a motion to set the public hearing for January 21st.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. And will this will go out on the website and stuff like that?
We will post it tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And work with NOGA, and it will be noticed in the appropriate newspapers. And we will set up for comments, we can set up an email for any comments that come in.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? We said January 21st, but that's a Tuesday. Is this a special meeting?
It's a special meeting.
Got it. Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
sorry.
At 6 p.m.
It's a special meeting for a public hearing to consider a moratorium,
Correct.
the language of which will be posted on the website. Okay.
Okay.